Regarding the continuum, I see that as a string that connects beads, and every single bead is an incarnation. The string is the thread which keeps all of that linked, and that is your spirit. And that string can be part of many other billions and trillions of strings. A drop of the ocean is your spirit. Your soul is like an ambassador of the spirit. Spirit cannot be corrupted. The soul goes out to have an experience. Depending on what those experiences were, we learn what we do and we leave that physical body, and there's still a continuity there. Consciousness is a state of being in knowing. Con, with, skio from the Latin, which is from the Greek. Skio, I know, the Greek skizon, which means like to cut through. So I'm cutting through lack of clarity that there is there in order to be in the ness. Ness in Saxon means a state of being within knowing. So it's a conscious, constant state.
Hi guys, welcome back to another segment with me, Stephen Gillen. This is where we really get the top leaders across the world bringing the valuable content to you. This guy is on a, in my opinion, higher level than Joe Dispensa. We're going to have Joe here soon, and he's really on a level with all of these top guys. He's the smartest person I know, guys. I have to say, I've had a privilege of knowing this guy for a while. His journey, his backstory, his soul as a person, and his learnings and innovations across a myriad of fields, making him a master polymath. It's just absolutely stunning and astounding. It's my great pleasure, to introduce Dr. Konstantin Pavlidis. Konstantin, it's really good to have you here. For people out there, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Well, I have been doing therapy for decades since I was young, healing since a child, and then I got into science. Especially I started with teaching science, my first degree in education, and then I started looking at biomechanical analysis of human movement with a specialty in understanding altered states of consciousness. So that's very different than, for example, we're speaking now, and that's a normal conscious mind, a conscious state. But we're missing out on a huge amount of information from our subconscious. Biologically, we estimate we're picking up around 20 million stimuli per second in our subconscious, basically stored in the body, and about 40 of those stimuli enter or are registered in the conscious mind per second, which means it's a ratio of about 1 to 500,000. So we miss out on a lot of really key information. The reason for it is so that we don't have an information overload. You know what happens with a computer when that situation occurs? The screen freezes. And in a certain way, we also freeze. And that's why we get a bit stuck. We need to hear things many times because the processing speed of the amount of information is basically a lot less than the information itself. So they don't match, they don't add up. And what happens in the end is that the conscious mind's ability to actually take all that information in, so you can absorb it, is slowed down enormously. So yeah, cognitive science is my background in terms of learning how we pick up information, how we learn and how we get things through our main portals, and that includes the senses. So cognitive science is the science of how we get things. Fundamentally, it evolved from 1989 to where we are now, fusing psychology, sociology, anthropology with neuroscience, linguistics and AI. And I've added to that another 6 sciences: genetics, so what we've inherited in terms of our codes; epigenetics, the impact of an external environment in catalyzing those genes and getting them activated. Then we look at embryology, which is the way in which a cell grows and develops, basically divide and multiply. Once the sperm enters the egg, that information is shared, and that becomes the growth of a whole new being eventually, with literally billions of cells and trillions of other organisms inside our body, which is an amazing feat within itself. and who knows which cell needs to, or which part of the body needs to develop, and basically we know it's brainstem and central nervous system and so forth. Then we move into what I've added is ethnology, which looks at studying morals, values, ethics, traditions and customs, and we see how those aspects influence our belief systems. So that's very, very important, because people do things, they die for their beliefs, clearly. So then I look at wisdom traditions, and they are the foundation of all religions, and I also would say a fair amount of philosophies and basically paradigms of life. So they also link us to what we would call the spiritual element of life. And so all of those 11 sciences are fused together through quantum physics, the quantum reality. And I call that psychoethnogenetics. It looks at the impact your ethnicity and your genes have on your psyche, on your soul. And when we do that, we end up with something that is extremely individual. Even if you're from the same family and you've had similar experiences, we can look at, by, as you say, unpacking everything in a very specific manner, we can see the way in which your experiences have been very unique to the way in which you've understood yourself, the relationship between yourself and the incoming stimulus, be it from parents, other family members, the environment that you grew up in, the places that you had gone to in case people also transmigrated, etc. But all of these factors begin to unfold and unravel, and they become, well, I see it as an HD digital photo with 1200, 1800, however many pixels, but we don't have that particular picture. Our capacity to see ourselves is very limited. As a result of what I said earlier, we don't get a lot of the information that our body and our cells are picking up. So the more pixels we can add to the picture, the more high definition, the more clarity, and the more choice you have as to what to do about the situation at hand.
Yeah, and let me just say, you know, I've certainly learnt in everything, clarity is where it's at, you know. Non-clarity being the enemy to progress, really, because there's always and or a but. Think about that, it's really important. It's the real concise clarity that wins it, that we're going to, that we're moving towards, that is important, that is the real change. You know, and what I think is really innovative, really unique, really fascinating about you, Konstantin, Dr. Konstantin, is that, you know, there are many specialists in different fields who you can't touch, and they're really good at epigenetics. They're the guy, or they're really good at some guru. You know, they're really good at the spiritual element. They're like real wisdoms that they're taking, that they're channeling. But I've never met someone like you that marries all these disciplines and really backs them up with the science, with the neuroscience, and just naturally and innately, it has to be said, packages them in a way that translates to immense valuable knowledge to people, places and things in this world. It really is life-changing, you know, for people. And I've seen that firsthand, you know, even the unintrusive medicines and different stuff you've done with people, where you don't need a pill, you don't need all this. You know, you've even said to me, Western medicine has a place, Stephen. But of course it does. But there is so much more, you know, and even in the wisdom traditions and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about the wisdom traditions so people can just understand that part of it. Like, you know, I know you're a neuroscientist, and it's very obvious of all the you know, the real diligence and the real pragmatic scientists part of you that you've got. But tell us a little bit about the wisdom traditions and how the spiritual marries with that. I think people are going to find that fascinating.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm a cognitive scientist. I didn't study only neuroscience, but that's an integral part of all that. Yeah. Wisdom traditions have their root in understanding the nature of our mind, which actually is not referring to the intellect, the left brain, the mental faculty alone at all. And the second factor is the nature of our existence on the planet. Why are we here? So they ask questions like, where do we come from? Why are we in the 3D body? Where do we go back to? So that's been explored extensively over at least the past 5, probably 10,000 years recorded history that we know of. I know a man in India who's exceptional in his capacity to decode an ancient text called the Rashmi theory from Vedanta, from the Rig Veda, from the Vedas. And that Rashmi theory refers to the wave, explaining how everything that we know, that we have seen, that we experience, comes from a wave. Now, we know that today through quantum physics, particle wave theory in terms of how light behaves. But this goes back between 4,000 and 6,000 years. So it's quite different. And he's a Vedic scientist. And he's someone that I have great respect for, and I've presented on at a conference of his, and we've had exchanges, and we've been sharing from the high level. His name is Acharya Agnivrat, a great scientist from India. And he's also asked if I was interested to do some research with him to explain the wisdom tradition scientifically, because it's not easy to do that. Fully agree. One of the reasons is that we have a very dominant Newtonian three-dimensional perspective of life. What's good about it? Why are we so attached to it? Why are we unable to let it go? Because at least 95% of scientists still function that way, and the last 5%, probably 95% of that group, is trying to understand the quantum from a Newtonian perspective. So I would say it's rather like looking up into the sky to try to see the night sky with a microscope. It's not actually very efficient and effective because it's designed to do something else. 3D mechanics, Newtonian mechanistic science, explains particles on the mesocosmic level, the in-between cosmic level, very well. It doesn't do too well in explaining what happens on the deeper levels, that means the subatomic particles, or the greater levels, which is the universal vastness of space levels. Consequence of that, when we speak about wisdom traditions, they are the traditions that have been around for as long as we can remember. So the issue there is that we have many different cultures coming from many different lineages. So they have a different take, a different perspective, a different language, a different paradigm. So the one thing that I've come to see that is, you can call it the bottom line common factor among wisdom traditions, is searching for where we've come from, why we're here, where we go back to, what is the nature of mind, what is the nature of human existence. More importantly, how can we focus on the purpose that we're here to clear our karma? What is our purpose here? And more importantly, in what way are we connected to a oneness, a wholeness, an integrated existence known as the monad, the unifying principle, or the unified field theory that people like Stephen Hawking were speaking about. So the common factor there is not belief or faith, but experience of your essential true self. And that's beyond what your conscious mind creates based on your identity, personality, character version of self. So I call that the personal self. And then we've got the non-personal self. What does that mean? It's a non-critical, non-judgmental, neutral self. A self that sits, waits, holds the space for whatever is there for us to be able to engage in from a neutral space without additions and subtractions. No favoritism, no like, no dislike. Be prepared to be proven wrong.
Yeah, this is a powerful place. I mean, even me in some of the dark days, you know me, where I've been, to come from a place with no judgment, nothing, it's not a place that many people know, but it's quite a powerful place if you're in the right way of the freedoms to really see the reality of what is going on, which I learned is really important. Now, look, I'm just going to come with the big questions here, right? Because I've got you in the chair, right? You know, I know people out there, they've got... So look, here's one, right? So tell us about karma. What really is it? And what is this karma journey? How does it translate into people's lives? You know, the epigenetics, you know, I know you've got all that, but how does it really translate? And what does it really mean to us now? And, you know, what do we need to do if that's giving us issues in a life that we're living now? What would you say about that?
Every single thought, feeling, sensation, word, and action creates karma. It is the immediate response or result of all of those. Your thoughts, your feelings, your senses, your words, your physical actions, enacting in the 3D. So it can be positive, it can be negative, it can be neutral. So I look at waves, because people say to me, how is it that we pick up vibes from other people when we speak about vibes? So yeah, because we tend to favor what we can see and touch over what we cannot see and touch. Agree?
Yeah.
Right. So what do we use to see and touch? See, touch, right? Eyes, senses that basically are there that enable us to engage with something in the immediate here now. Our eyes directly connected to thoughts, and our touch directly connected to feelings. When you see something, you have a thought about it immediately, right? And then there's a consequent feeling. And the touch is the sensation, you know, smooth, rough, hot, cold, energetic, vibrant, whatever. Now, can we see and touch our thoughts and feelings?
Of course we can't.
Right.
But they're there, right?
Here, this is where I'm coming from. So we use what we can't see and touch, thoughts and feelings, to validate and justify what we can see and touch in the 3D world. Yes?
Yeah.
Right. So from a cognitive science perspective, that's a bias, a cognitive bias. So we're favoring something in terms of an action and a mode of operating over something that isn't necessarily logical. So because we do it, if we do it constantly, this becomes a cognitive dissonance. So it means it's not in alignment with sounding. Sounding means something sounds good. Even the word persona, it means according to the sound. Persona. To what? So your persona is according to the way you speak or others speak at you and about you. So sound is really powerful in all of this. It has to do with wave motion. Yeah. So if you've got two waves and they're aligned, when they meet, they augment, they get bigger. That's called a constructive interference. So the wave power or energy gets bigger. Now if they're out of sync, out of phase, when they meet, that's called a destructive interference. The first one is resounding, because this has contacted and it resounds. It's resonance. The second one, it's not sounding, it's dissounding, so we call it dissonance. Yeah. So the cognitive element of that resonance, dissonance, or something where the waves actually don't touch, so they are in assonance. Okay, that's really, really critical to understand. Yeah. The media use this knowledge to create very specific messages. Yeah. There's a formula that's great. You make a very impactful headline, you back it up with numbers, then you tell a story. And now, because the headline catches your attention, that's the conscious mind, you back it up with numbers, it ticks the box and says, oh yeah, logic and reasoning, got that, you know, makes sense, I'll accept that. Then you tell a story. Now the story starts going into the heart. And it goes into the emotions. Then you've hooked them. So I call it, because you see, you can take information, right? And you take misinformation, where Chinese whispers, right? And then it's mixed with disinformation. Means I'm adding information to this broth, this soup, right? In order to get the audience's mind in the direction that I want it to go in, right? So I call that info noise. We've got white noise from sound, right? And light, but this, it's like interference. And this is information noise. So we're able to actually send messages from what looks like the conscious mind into the subconscious.
And this, of course, this is part of the karmic kind of translation in a way.
So when you speak of karma, doing things like this is consciously creating a karma, which any action has a price, as it were. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now, that's in the 3D level. But for every action, there is a parallel space-time reality where that action is occurring on other planes as well, which is not necessarily equal and opposite. That's a quantum.
Right, okay, right. You're going to have to, because right, unpack and explain this just a bit, because even I'm just, I need a bit more on that one there. So it's happening on other planes and other realities. That's right. So what does that mean? Clarify that for me.
Another space-time reality, which we are aware of. We've got space, time, energy, and matter. And when you combine those four through the equations that Einstein gave us, so we're trying to understand what the connection is between them. What is the unifying factor? So for me, it's consciousness. Right? Space, time, energy, matter. We may have the math to explain how they're connected, but the quantity that and the entity that connects them is consciousness itself. So consciousness is above and beyond our individually created conscious awareness. They say it's an epiphenomenon, a phenomenon outside of the brain. So without the brain, you have no consciousness. But then tests have been done to indicate this. And
I mean, the brain is like a switching station. It doesn't think; it translates thought. You know. And the thing about consciousness, which I've just after so much esoteric study, meeting many really unbelievable people like yourself, but my own internal journey is look, there can't be no death of consciousness, because there's no break in consciousness. Even if you sleep or you're put under, when you come, there is that continuous link of consciousness. It doesn't stop and you reboot. So there's more evidence that consciousness will be consciousness, right? So really there is no death, there is just consciousness.
Well, what I see it as is there's an ocean, and then a drop is taken out of that ocean and creates our first experience, which you could call spirit, if you like. That is closest to consciousness, which is not personal. It does not have an individual agenda as such. It just needs to, as they say in wisdom traditions, know itself in order,
that it is,
not in chaos,
I am,
to be itself.
That I exist.
Exactly.
And that's consciousness. The start.
Well. So consciousness has two arms. The passive, receiving, supportive, and vessel arm I call wisdom. And the active, giving, and enabling and manifesting arm is intelligence. So consciousness has these two parts, a yin and a yang. And so the Tao is consciousness, and it and from the Tao come the two, and from the two come the three, which is the integration of those first three as such, which is a third entity, and then from those three come the multitude, right? Of which at the time they said 10,000, 100,000, whatever.
So this makes sense. You see, I'm trying to come around to make something quite complex, quite absorbable, right? The age-old question, right? The monumental questions, right? But it's that then kind of shows us about the karmic journey of many lives, because consciousness just is. And just as if you go to sleep or you wake up, although there may be dream states and different states and all that within that, your conscious line is, a continuum. It's continuous. So there's evidence there that there's no blips. Consciousness is a through line, as it were. So that then lends really good evidence to, even if you was to die, that of course, have another life or go, I'm going to ask you about this because it's fascinating to many people, including myself. But there's just a little kind of understanding that consciousness has a through line, which certainly can span different lifetimes, right? It just gives you an understanding of what that possibility could be. So tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on, there's a book out there I remember reading, Many Lives, Many Masters, I think it was called. Great book. Many Lives, Many Masters. Great title, by the way. So really take us through it, because I know you have some real valuable, amazing, esoteric kind of, understanding of this stuff. So how does that really translate, this stuff?
So regarding the continuum, I see that as a string that connects beads. And every single bead is an incarnation, right? The string is the thread which keeps all of that linked. And that is your spirit. And that string can be part of many other billions and trillions of strings. We can call them like the string theory, as it were, that those strings or drop of the ocean is your spirit, and your soul is like an ambassador, an emissary of the spirit. Spirit cannot be corrupted. The soul goes out to have an experience, and depending on what those experiences were, we learn what we do and we leave that physical body, and there's still a continuity there. Some people speak of an oversoul. So that oversoul takes care of certain phases in the growth and development of that person's conscious self. And so consciousness is a state of being in knowing. Con, with, skio from the Latin, which is from the Greek. Skio, I know, the Greek skizon, which means like to cut through. So I'm cutting through whatever confusion, doubt, or lack of clarity that there is there, in order to be in the ness. Ness in Saxon means a state of being within knowing. Right. So it's a conscious, constant state of itself.
Yeah, that's amazing, that unpacking that. It really is, right? And it makes so much sense, of course, the root of the word. But I've just got to jump in there, because I've just never heard that, but it makes so much sense, where you've just said there, Konstantin, about the spirit can't be corrupted, but the soul is an emissary, as you will, of the spirit. So many people think the soul, the spirit, they're all one, but of course this makes sense of the journey and translation of this. I've never heard it said before like that.
So if you can imagine, you're the motor in the car, and basically you're the driver, right, of the vehicle, as it were. You give the engine the power. But whoever goes into the car, the way they treat the car and use it, abuse it, etc., that's where personality and character get imbued. That's more like the psyche. But the motor stays pure unless it is not taken care of.
So here's a question then. So, if we have many lives, and it's, I get that thread, and I'm really down with this. I do, my instinct, my learning is that's right, what you're saying there. This silver thread to the divine, to our maker, whatever, into this plane, living planes, many experiences, many lives, and all this stuff. So, if the soul is an emissary, does it change every time, every life, or what? You see, people, especially in Western traditions, they have the soul as that's it. They don't think about the spirit. They think the soul is the soul, and that's the essence of everything. So unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons for that is that look at a stillborn child, or even a woman who loses the child at 3 or 4 months. So there's the soul, as they say traditionally, the soul enters the fetus, embryo becomes fetus at around 3 months. So the issue here that's important to understand is that without soul animating the fetus, you can easily be stillborn. There's something that needs to be there that matches, something on the invisible, intangible level that matches the visible, tangible part of us. So we have these two parts to us. Just like we have our thoughts and feelings that we cannot see and touch, but we know they're there. We use them every moment of every day, consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, it doesn't matter. The soul itself is what has the experience, it receives the experience, and then it puts it into what I see, what it becomes is an archive. That's your individual personal akasha. The akasha is the archives. So the soul is your individual akasha. Right. So everything gets stored into your individual library, as it were, for this particular life. Now, depending on the work done and the level of awareness that the individual can and does develop, they then can link with archives of previous lives. Because you have, like through the net, a connection with another library, which is who you were in a previous life. Because once you leave this time, you'll never come back as Stephen Gillen, who was born wherever you were born in London and then grew up in Belfast and all the rest of it. Yeah? That's an experience that's all to do with this life. Yeah. So there are oversouls that act as the link between this particular experiential reality and the other ones. So they're almost like teams that make up the big magnanimous experiential body of knowledge and awareness that today in this life, in this 3D body, is called Stephen Gillen.
Look, I get it, I really do. But here's the big question. So all of this amazing design, all right? Brilliant design. And, you know, you open your eyes, it's obvious. You can see it in a leaf, all right? It's amazing, all right? But what is the point of it then? So let me ask you, for us, you know, us mere mortals down here or whatever, some more than others or whatever, what do you say is the point of this big journey through life, or many lives and stuff like that, Konstantin?
The point is growth for expansion of your awareness into consciousness so that you reconnect with the source where we all came from. That's called evolution. Yeah. So that's how we will evolve. If evolution is not simply something that happens as a result of repeated activity, such as what was spoken about in the past where Darwin is concerned, and even that was contested with Lamarck's theory of extension of the necks of animals, so because that way they could reach higher leaves in a tree for the purposes of food, etc. And neither is it limited to survival of the fittest. I don't see that survival is evolving. It's actually keeping us at a level that we were originally created for. It's probably around 5 million years old, the human structure, the brain itself. It's about tribalism. And you don't think out of the box for more than around 20 people. So we've got that element, the tribal brain, as it were. Then there's the genetic element, the self-centeredness for survival, which is really critical. So that's Dawkins writes about the selfish gene and so forth. It's written about. Then we look, if those two are the facts in terms of our biological makeup, then the third one, if we start thinking outside of 20 people, it actually goes against our instinctive nature. So we have to replace that somehow from the exclusive mindset to an inclusive one, which is not simple to do. So we have to think beyond, especially if you're in a community of hundreds of people or thousands of people in a society, or hundreds of thousands, and millions within your actual country, and then billions on planet Earth. Thinking in that manner is not natural for the human brain. So it gets sabotaged by what is natural, which is basically the primordial instinct for survival, which then leads to my group and my clan, and my tribe and my clan, and then moving out to favoritism based on me feeling, number one, safety, comfort and security, which I get from the mother principle. The father is meant to offer us protection, which then leads to what I see as guidance and expansion and eventually evolution. Both of those lead to evolution. Because if you still do not feel the safety, comfort and security from the mother genes and or input, the guidance that she offers in a nutritional, nurturing context, and the protection, the maternal instinctive protection, then your subconscious is feeling something is missing. And the lack is what drives us toward feeling the need to replace it with something that makes us feel, what's in it for me? It makes us feel fulfilled for that moment. Yeah. And so there are these aspects which can easily lead us off track from our natural propensity to grow. And it's because we get pulled back by the survival instinct.
Survival instinct.
I mean, primordial instinct for survival.
Yeah, but look, and it's definitely there, you know, and it is a lethal, evolutionary thing in the sense that things are much too long for that to be, you know, for us, we're quite dumb in that way for what I see. I say we're brilliant and wicked, really in equal measure. You know, that's what I say. We've had really amazing talks about, you know, all of this stuff. You know, and I remember somebody said to me the other day, then we were talking, he said, look, Stephen, like, you know, the species, human nature, all this stuff is you know, we're built to self-destruct, right? You know, I had to laugh when you said that. I think of my own journey, I think of many others, and I think of the challenge of why that seems definitely to be the case. Tell us about that, why that is, and what do we do to get around that?
Well, I would say the self-destruct has to do with the lack of understanding where we've come from and why we're here. We're in contradiction between the survival instinct and a part of us that is rearing to jump out of that prison and grow and expand. But we don't have the mechanisms, the programs that we have in our subconscious. That's exactly what I was saying earlier, will sabotage the capacity to expand because of that contradiction. So it becomes basically like a cage that we create for ourselves, and we're seeing the possibility of the freedom and the expansion and what benefits we will gain by allowing ourselves to be more embracing, more inclusive. We see those benefits with our conscious mind. The subconscious element of the identity itself and the dynamics there say, no, I don't feel safe, comfortable and secure enough. So I see that there is a contradiction and a constant conflict. So I spoke before about the conscious mind, well, trusting something you can't see or using something you can't see and touch to validate something that you can. This is a cognitive bias becoming a dissonance. That dissonance creates confusion. It leads to doubt. That leads to a friction internally that creates a conflict within, that creates then blockages between our thinking, our feeling, through the nervous system, hormonal system, and the body electric that connects those two with our physical body. And that leads to disease of any form.